Hello and welcome back. As always, my name is Kelly, and it is time to recap the worst of last year. Everyone's favorite time, especially mine. It's mine because I actually remember to make videos on time and things don't get in the way. And you might have noticed I have a bit of a new setup with some actual lighting. This is going to change, hopefully, in the next little while, but this is pretty much how my setup's going to be until I can tweak some stuff. So don't be surprised if, of course, a couple of videos things shift around. But enough of the updates. That's not what you're here for. What you're here for is the bad films of 2023, and there were a lot of them. Yeah, it was honestly hard to narrow this list down because there were just a lot of really bad films. It felt like all of the major studios kind of flopped this year. That's not to say there weren't good films. There were actually a lot of them, but they tended to come from smaller sources, more indie films, more artistic oriented. All of the big franchises pretty much just petered out except for a couple of big examples. Movie theaters in general are still trying to recover from the COVID pretty much disaster that almost tanked them, and it didn't seem like any of the big films could actually put butts in seats. The thing that actually put butts in seats was a movie about a toy and a concert. All in all, this film year is probably going to be remembered as one of the weaker years, but it's also going to be one of the years when a lot of the big trends that have been keeping everything afloat through the 2010s finally came crashing down like everyone predicted. But more about that when we actually get to the list proper. Starting off always are the dishonorable mentions. Knights of the Zodiac. Pretty much every single old school anime fan right now is cringing because yes, this movie did actually happen. And they tried to shove pretty much 30 episodes worth of material into a 2-hour film. And it's just as bad as you think. The Boogeyman. I was also tempted to call this Stephen King's The Boogeyman, but that's giving this movie more credit than it deserves. Disney's Wish. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Disney films on this, and there is a few that I think are just worse than this one, but this is still pretty freaking bad, especially since it's supposed to be a 100-year anniversary film, celebrating everything that came before. Retribution. I've gone on record and described Liam Neeson films like potato chips. They're not necessarily good for you, but you like to eat them every now and then. This is proof that those chips can get very, very stale and not appetizing at all. And one more dishonorable mention, and this is a special case, I'll explain. The Sound of Freedom. Normally a film like this wouldn't actually make my list because the movie itself, quality-wise, acting, filmmaking, it's actually a pretty decent film. And it is quite enjoyable. However, everything that's come out about this film, the studio that made it, how they basically gamed the system and bought out theaters to make it seem like it's some big political message, as well as the film being about a guy who is a sexual predator who is being convicted in Utah as we speak. Yeah, this movie just feels all kinds of ucky, and I don't want to give it any credit at all. If you want more on that subject, Philip DeFranco did an entire segment on it, and I'll link that video down in the description below. Check it out, because honestly, I'm hoping that this is just a one-time thing, and Angel Studios really just didn't know what they were doing with it. But with that uncomfortableness out of the way, let's move on to the actual list proper with, of course, number 11. Why number 11? Because of tradition at this point. Just go with it. Number 11. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. This one is a little painful for me to actually put on this list because I was actually looking forward to it. I really enjoyed the first Aquaman movie. I think it is some of the most dumb fun we've seen in the superhero franchise in a long time. It throws everything at the wall, doesn't really care if it all fits together. It just kind of meshed it all together and dumped it on you and said, enjoy. And I did enjoy the first one. However, this film, the sequel, I have to believe that the studio basically tore this to shreds. Scenes in this are edited so badly it makes Suicide Squad from 2015, 2016, whenever that was, actually look competent. There's so much voiceover that you can clearly tell that there are scenes missing here and there. Things don't happen in a cohesive manner. There's just way too much obvious editing problems for there not to have been some studio exec that said, cut this down to 2 hours because we did not want another 3-hour film inside of theaters. And of course, there's a reason they probably did that, and that's the whole Amber Heard situation. And I'm not going to comment on that at all, other than to say, if you're going to cut her out, fully cut her out of the film. She is still in this enough to say, probably that they fulfilled some kind of contract they had with her. However, she's clearly supposed to be in a lot more of this movie, and because she's not there, the whole movie suffers. So either replace her and reshoot this back into the movie, or cut her out. Or, more accurately, just give us the full film and say it was done before all the Amber Heard shit came out. You did the same thing with Flash not 6 months earlier. Spoilers now, Flash isn't on this list because for all of its bad things, it was still a cohesive story. You got to feel for Barry Allen in that movie, especially in the last act of the film, but you can't say any of that for this film, the end of the DCEU as we know it, before it gets rebooted by James Gunn, and yet you could not care less about anybody that's in this film. Pretty much the only good thing I can say about it is there's a couple of fight scenes that were interesting. That's about it. But that is the lowest bar I can give it. Number 10. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. The first of many Disney properties that are going to be on this list this year. Just forewarning. And this is probably the most tired of all of them. It is really, really, really bad to say that there is a genuine argument to ask which one is worse, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull or Dial of Destiny. This Indiana Jones film feels like it should have stayed dead and buried. They left Indy in a good place inside of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and even hinted that they were going to move on to new adventures with new characters, aka Indy's son. And a lot of people didn't like that because they don't like Shia LaBeouf, but you could have just taken that premise and just replaced Shia LaBeouf with another actor. Instead, they basically wrote Shia LaBeouf really badly and said he died in a war. Yes, the rebel who totally didn't go against authority inside of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull signed up for the army willingly. Oh, good on him. But that's the least of this movie's problems. It is just so boring. There's no life inside of it. They have one interesting chase sequence, but it's so much green screen inside of it that really, why did they even do it? They did it because Harrison Ford is over 80 years old and he can't do stunts like he did in the original. And unfortunately, that mentality is sprinkled across this entire film. This is an old man putting on his old hat and pretending to live the good old days. But the movie falls flat because it's pretty clear that none of the filmmakers had any passion for what they were doing. The best sequence of this movie is the opening where it flashes back to World War II and we get to see D.H. Harrison Ford doing old school indie stuff. But that doesn't really work because, de-aged Harrison Ford. But it's still the most fun that the whole thing gets. No matter what they do inside of this, they don't go over the top and crazy until the last 10 minutes, and they want to get out of that scene so fast, they literally knock out Indiana Jones and drag him out of it. All in all, Dial of Destiny is proof that franchises need to be allowed to die or move on. We can't keep living in the past. We can't keep bringing these 70-year-old actors and expect them to do their job as well as they did before. And we cannot just CGI, de-age, AI this shit and make it work. It all sucks. And this is why pretty much all of Hollywood went on strike against the studios who are pushing this crap. Thank God they won, but I do fear for what comes next because I don't think this battle is over. They won the fight. They did not win the war. Number 9. Mafia Mama. Full disclosure, I know I am not the target demographic of this movie. This film is clearly for 50-year-old wine moms to go and have some fun. And maybe they got more enjoyment out of this than I did, but this movie was boring. I didn't see this one in theaters. I watched this one when it came out on Blu-ray, and I gotta say that I was just bored. I only forced myself through it just to say that I watched it. Which is sad, because the trailer actually kind of looked interesting. There was some good, subtle humor here. But really, other than the couple of jokes that were in the trailer, I didn't even giggle through this. But it's clearly going for more of a comedic action tone. So, what was I supposed to get out of this? Again, I'm pretty sure I'm just not the target demographic for this. I don't know. There's not much else I can say about this movie. It was just boring, and I wish I got that 2 hours back. Unfortunately, there are much worse things than being boring. Hence, Number 8. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium. Now, many of you might have already asked the question or typed it in the comments, why isn't Flash on this list? Because there's a much worse Flash out there, and it's Ant-Man and the Wasp 3 Quantumanium. Everything that you got mad at the Flash for, Ant-Man did first, and by far a lot worse earlier this year. The CG sucked, the acting was bad from pretty much everybody, the story was nonsensical. MODOK, that's all I have to say, MODOK. And everything good about that movie is no longer part of the MCU. And I did not want it to be that way. I really enjoy the first Ant-Man, and I'm that guy who really enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought that was a good low-tier adventure before we got into the high stuff with Endgame and Infinity War. However, this film is trying to be Endgame and Infinity War with 1,000% less good writing. It's trying to set up the young Avengers. You've got the dad and the daughter clashing. One thinks that they did enough and saved the world. The other one thinks that they didn't do enough and they can do more. Classic story, and it just comes off as painful, trite, and boring. And then you get into the actual quantum realm, and it's just a crappier version of space. There's like barely anything interesting here. It's just space, but on a smaller scale. Occasionally they have to stick their hands in something gross and go, ooh, look how gross this is. But where is the investment? Where's the world building? Why do they control things through organic tech? Give us some reasons for that. Why is Bill Murray in this movie? His character does nothing and could have been played by anyone, yet you paid for Bill Murray to show up and put him all over the advertisement, yet he's in one scene in the film. Answer, this movie is clearly not where it's supposed to be. A lot of the problems with the MCU came from, unfortunately, COVID, but a lot of things got reshuffled, and it's very clear that Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumanium was reshuffled and had to be edited to fit its new place. And because they didn't just rewrite the whole script or just start over from scratch, they instead tried to salvage what they clearly already had and was part of another movie entirely, the whole thing just fell flat. There's no real other way to say it. This movie clearly has 3 different endings, and they're all still present in the film. They just put ADR over 2 of them to make you think that that's not how this movie ended. And then we talk about the graphics, and there's no way to, unfortunately, get around it. We have to talk about MODOK. The worst thing in any superhero movie, period. I will fully put it out there. I've never been a fan of MODOK. I think he's stupid. I think his design is stupid, and I think his overall appearance in anything is just stupid. He's a meek henchman that gets knocked away before they get to the real bad guy. But there's been a real push to try to make him something more, and unfortunately this film also did that by trying to tie him into the first movie's villain, which on paper isn't a bad idea. Just have him act more like MODOK and not Darren Cross trying to be funny. You don't even remember who Darren Cross is. Yellow Jacket was so forgettable in the first movie because he wasn't the point of the first movie. He was just a bad guy because a superhero movie has to have a bad guy. It would have been fine if you just made him MODOK here and just made him a little henchman, but instead you had to show off his stupid CGI butt. You had to have him make really bad jokes and get smacked around by Kang every now and then. He has way too much screen time, and there's way too many moments where you can say, they wanted to make that a meme. He's just a meme. He's intentionally looking bad because some studio exec thought that would be funny and that would look good for them kids. And doesn't that just sum up all the problems with modern Marvel right now? Like, it doesn't feel like they're making movies to tie into a grander story like they did before. It feels like they're just making movies so they can make memes and that gets them clicks and impressions. Though, I can say that it's not the worst Marvel production that came out this year. We'll talk about that a little later. Number 7. The Meg 2. The Trench. It wouldn't be the worst list if there wasn't a shitty shark movie on it. And the sad thing is that you can tell this movie is trying to be bad on purpose. It's supposed to be an enjoyable bad. And that would be fine on paper. However, the movie itself is just plain bad. I will give it credit that the movie has a little bit more going as far as like a visual design. Like, you can tell they spent a lot of time designing these exosuits. Also, the actors are trying to make this fun and lighthearted, but it really doesn't come out until like the last act when they start doing all the stuff you saw in the trailer where the Meg's like eating a beach and stuff and there's a kraken going around. It's the only time in the movie that actually feels fun bad. But that's literally the last 15 minutes of the movie. The rest of the film is this really stupid, like, plot of them mining stuff out of the trench and putting holes in it so the Megs can get out through the thermo layer or whatever. And it's just a bunch of gobbledygook that you don't care about. This movie is not about the Meg. The movie is about the trench. And the trench is boring as shit. They try to go for like a pseudo-horror sci-fi film from the mid-2000s feel for it, but it's just ultimately boring. Nothing really happens down there of note, except the one time where Jason Statham takes off his suit while literally so far under the water that it would flatten him without it, and just swims outside, which he can apparently do for like a minute. What? Look, I know that you can survive decompression in a vacuum of space for about a minute if you blow out all your air and keep things from expanding and whatnot, but no one's ever actually tested that, just FYI, and I'm pretty sure that doesn't work under the water, where instead of being in a vacuum, it's literally being under a fucking anvil. Pressure works differently when there's zero or when there's a lot of it. But that's too much logic and science for this film that unfortunately spouts a bunch of logic and science at you throughout this entire first 3/4 of the film, because we have to explain every reason why these Megs can stay down here and now they're getting out and stuff, and why mining down here is so bad, before they finally get to the damn beach so that we can enjoy some shark antics where they're blowing it up with a fucking helicopter. One other thing I'll say about this film before we move on, Jason Statham's having the time of his life. You're going to hear me say that again later in this list. Number 6, 65. Going from the crappy shark film to the crappy dinosaur film. And this one's just painful for me. 65 on paper looks like a very good project that has a lot going for it. Adam Driver pretty much in a solo carried film where he's stranded on an alien planet that turns out to be prehistoric Earth with dinosaurs everywhere. This movie had potential. However, the problem here is 100% writing. There's pretty much no difference between this film, story-wise, and After Earth with the Smiths. And frankly speaking, After Earth was more interesting than this was. Because they didn't just do dinosaurs in prehistoric times. They actually created monsters. They created situations. They tried to do something interesting. But effectively, 65 is just that, but with dinos. Like, there's no weird weather. There's no big birds. It's just dinosaurs. T-Rex. Raptor. Ooh. Yeah, this movie is boring as shit. And there are worse things to be than boring. And it's clear that there was somebody trying here. Adam Driver especially is acting the hell out of this. Even the girl that he's tagging along, who they can't actually speak the same language with, they're doing a good job too, but really they've got nothing to work with. This is pretty much the same as like a Linorama comedy. The scene was probably walk here, talk like this for a couple of minutes. Like, it's very loose script where I feel like they were improvising half the time. It didn't feel like things happened in a cohesive way. Which would have been fine if you actually kept my attention, but you didn't. I genuinely fell asleep in this and had to backtrack the movie 20 minutes when I was watching it at home. Like, that's not a good sign. It is also a bit of a disappointment because the trailer didn't look bad, and again, Adam Driver is Adam Driver. He can deliver. So, I don't know, maybe I'm putting it a little bit higher than it deserves, but yeah, I can't deny it. It was pretty bad. Number 5, The Little Mermaid. Stop making these stupid remakes. Please. Maybe one of them has been decent, and that's just one. One of them has been decent. All of them suck. They suffer from pretty much the exact same problems every single goddamn time. They're basically shot-for-shot remakes. They're somehow 30, 40 minutes longer than the originals. They've got pretensions shoved up their ass, and they're not fun. I will say this one has a couple of things going for it. Halle Bailey, not Barry, Bailey, I keep messing that up. She is a very, very good singer inside of this, and she does a great job with all of the songs. However, she is not a very good actress, and when she's not singing, she pretty much just does this the entire movie. It's not a good performance. It really isn't. But she's got nothing on Prince Charming over here. Oh boy. Halle at least can sing. This guy can't. And that's pretty much the dichotomy of the film. It's redoing everything that happened before. You got a decent singer or you got a bad singer. The one thing I was surprised by is Melissa McCarthy actually wasn't that bad as Ursula. She actually acted for once. And the Melissa McCarthy isms only really happened like once or twice. So kudos on the director for being able to rein her in. But she's still only passable in the role. If you really want to see a more modern version with pretty much every song inside of this movie, minus Scuttlebutt, thank God, just go watch the stage play, which is where they pulled everything from. But this movie has no reason to exist other than just to put butts in seats. But it couldn't even do that because we're all tired of this. We are sick of these stupid remakes. Disney needs to change. But unfortunately, they still have a few more movies on this list. Number 4. Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. It wasn't bad enough that we had the Little Mermaid remake shot for shot came out. No. We have to have an animated mermaid movie that basically just makes fun of this. An animated film so bad they pulled it from theaters within a week. Is there really much more I can say about this? Oh yeah, the animation was kind of bad also. But it's not bad in the effortless way, but more in the, you put the effort in the wrong areas. Like, the movie is very colorful, things flow, but unfortunately, nothing moves right. It doesn't feel like they're swimming so much as being pulled by a mouse from one area to another. And unfortunately, a very easy example of pretty much how to do that kind of fluid animation correctly, Disney did, I believe, last year with Luca. Or that might have been 2 years ago. Don't quote me. But yeah, the animation there is like what they're trying to go for, but better. Yeah, this movie is pretty much just Red, but with fish people. And it sucked. I can't really give you anything else out of it because I can barely remember anything from it. And I watched it like maybe 2 months ago. And being that forgettable is really bad. So, yeah. Moving on. Number 3. The Exorcist Believer. This is probably the most expensive failure you're ever going to see from Blumhouse Studios. This is the long-awaited sequel to the original Exorcist. Everyone remembers The Exorcist. It's one of those iconic horror films of all time. Never mind, there have been a lot of sequels to that movie, but we're going to pretend that they don't exist so that we can reboot this franchise once more. We even brought back one of the actresses from the original Exorcist film to be in our marketing, because she immediately pretty much gets booted out of the film within 5 minutes of being there. This film is unfortunately a sign of a lot of other trends that are just bad in Hollywood in general, because it's a rebooting of an old franchise yet again, with nostalgia bait and old actors and actresses, yet again, and it's basically just every shitty knockoff Exorcist film you've ever seen. And the truth is that they actually had a pretty decent idea. I liked the idea of the mythos expanding beyond Christianity. You know, it's not just the devil and Satan. Every religion has these entities, names for these entities, and they're basically using all forms of exorcism to try to combat this thing. But in execution, this is the most generic, boring film you've ever seen inside of this possession genre. And the actors are all trying, especially the dad inside of this, but really, the movie just is nothing. It is just so bland. When the exorcism is actually going down, it's just generic. They don't do anything with it. Give us some more visual effects. Give us some more practical effects. You try to do the stupid throw-up scene from the original, but it looks a hell of a lot worse when it's just CGI. I don't know, put some weird gunk in the girl's mouth so they can actually vomit up a actual thing. Like, what happened to practical effects? Answer, studios think that CGI is cheaper, but they won't pay for good CGI, so ultimately, the movie just looks like garbage. And the movie becomes garbage because of it. And remember how I said this was the most expensive failure? Well, it turns out that to get the rights to The Exorcist, Blumhouse had to reportedly dish out $400 million for them. $400 million! For this movie made like $20 million. I'll look at the actual number later and put it down here, but like that is hilarious. And it even gets worse when Five Nights at Freddy's, produced by the same studio, and I guarantee you, costing a hell of a lot less than this, made like $500 million. And many people think that should be on the worst list. I don't. I think it was actually really good and true to the source material. Unlike this movie that brought back one of the original characters, gouged her eyes out, and threw her in a hospital within 5 minutes of being on screen. It's just $400 million. That just boggles the mind. There's no way that they're not making sequels to this movie. And they had better at least put some effort into them if they want to recoup any of this money. But I can't see a sequel from this movie doing anything in theaters, even if it's good. You've pissed your goodwill away at this point. There's nobody who's going to show up to those movies except people like me who make videos for them. This is enjoyable. We haven't talked about Disney for a little bit. I should probably do that again. Number 2. The Marvels. On a sheer technical level, on a sheer script writing technical level, and editing level, this is probably the worst Marvel film to date. Period. The effects look bad. This movie has clearly gone through the same kind of treatment that Ant-Man did, being chopped up from different versions, but it feels more like they didn't have a finished script before they actually filmed. There's so much bad green screen inside of this. It's laughable. There's no continuity in this film with their other projects. As a lot of people pointed out, it seems really weird that Nick Fury is cracking jokes and being lighthearted in this movie, when just in the last project that they released, just before this, Secret Invasion, Nick Fury is a drunk, depressed has-been. Like, what the fuck happened between these two projects? Answer, nobody cared. Nobody cared. There's no life in this movie. I take that back. One person cared. The actress that played Kamala Khan in this is giving 110,000% trying to drag this movie into something in the form of enjoyable. But enthusiasm cannot save a production, especially when your editing is so bad that Ms. Marvel herself, in the first opening action sequence of the movie, changes clothes 3 times between cuts, because every single time they switched bodies was from a different point of the movie. Nobody caught that she changed out of her superhero garb twice in the middle of an action sequence. And it just went downhill from there. There is no cohesive through point between the first scene and the last one. Everything just goes completely randomly. At one point, they're on a planet where everyone talks in song. I've seen that done before. It can work. I'm not blind to the fact that that's been done before. But why is it this one small 10-minute sequence pisses me off so much? Because it doesn't mean anything in the grander scheme of things. If you're going to do that, why not actually have the action sequence timed to one of their songs? Make it a big grand battle cry, Actually do something with it. But no, it's just a stupid Disney reference because Ms. Marvel suddenly magics a dress out of nowhere and starts singing herself. Okay, there's a third actress here, right? The one playing Monica Rambeau. She does something, right? No, she doesn't. If you thought they were going to do anything with her character or have her do anything really important in this movie, you're wrong. She doesn't do anything until the very last possible act of this movie, and she ends up going to the world of the X-Men. Spoilers. We all know what's coming. Deadpool 3 comes out in May. There's no surprise here. It's nothing in this movie except setup for another movie. And this is why people are sick to death of superhero films. Look, I'm a superhero guy. Literally, this whole section, all 5 shelves other than the bottom shelf of my video games, are superhero stuff. I am your target demographic, and I am bored out of my mind because you don't put enough care into your films to make sure they're good. This movie should not have been released in this state. You just wasted the work of thousands of people. Also, you could make a stupid deadline and some exec at studio could get a paycheck. Did you learn nothing from when they did this over at Warner Brothers with Justice League? And ultimately, that's Disney in a nutshell right now. Everything is just a quick money-making scheme. They don't care about their films. That's why a 100-year anniversary animated film is so lifeless and boring, nobody wanted to go see it. It's why all of their superhero movies keep failing so bad, -1 for the year. Just one. And it's why nobody can actually get on board with what they're doing, because they don't even know what they're doing anymore. Kevin Feige either isn't caring or he's stretched too thin to care. And the Marvels is this stupid amalgam baby child of this broken system. And I'm glad, because it seems like they finally figured out that they need to do something. The only Marvel movie coming out next year is Deadpool 3. The only one, as far as I know. Everything else got delayed or canceled, which has caused a bunch of problems behind the screen. Don't look up anything about what's going on with Blade. Trust me, just pretend that none of that's going on and let them figure their shit out. But this movie is the tipping point. If Deadpool 3 sucks, nobody is going to go to the Marvel movies anymore. They have to legitimately be putting back in effort for anybody to care. If they don't, Marvel is dead. And to some, that's a good thing. To me, again, superhero wall here. That would be a terrible loss, in my opinion. Number 1. Expendables. And finally, we get to Expendables 4, or as the title is very stupidly said, Expendables. Did you learn nothing from Fan Force Stick? Did you learn nothing from Fan Force Stick? This movie is pretty much a culmination of everything bad on this list. It's a franchise that's running way too goddamn long and nobody wants to be a part of it because everyone's getting old and can't do what they did before. It's trying to be fun and lighthearted, but it comes off as just boring and contrite. Everybody in the film is pretty much on autopilot, give me a paycheck, except for Jason Statham, who's trying to bring this into fun bad territory. Yeah, we got legendary martial artists, so we can actually have a fight scene and have it edited so shittily that you're wasting this guy's talent. Isn't this like the 4th time they've done this to the entire cast of Raid? Like, there was a Mark Wahlberg movie that did it. They did it in Star Wars. Like, why do you keep hiring these guys if you do not give them the editing team or the production team in general to make their shit look good? Oh, and then we get to the Rush green screen and CGI that somehow looks way worse than even the Marvels. I would believe MODOK more than I did half the shots on this ship at the end of the film. And it's very clear that this franchise just needs to die. There's no fun in it because it's so boring. There's no life in it because the actors don't even care about it. It is a paycheck movie that's been rushed out the door as fast as possible to put butts in seats, but nobody ever went to the theater to put butts in seats. And ultimately, this is a capstone for everything that's on this list. The studios need to do better. These are all problems that have been prevalent for the last decade of filmmaking from studios. And now they're starting to fall flat. And my big hope for 2024 and 2025 is that this year was a reckoning. This year proved they can't just keep playing by this old playbook. They need to try more and do better. Also, why is a plot point in your movie just pissing on a grate? I'm sorry, that scene was just so stupid. And that's it for me. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Tell me what your worst films were in the comments down below. Let's get some healthy discussion going. And as always, if you like what you saw, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Just, make sure the channel numbers go bigger. And don't worry, I do have a best list on the way, as well as hopefully some reviews now that I have a setup in my new place. So, yeah, hopefully you'll see a lot more from me here soon. You'll at least see one thing. So, until then, see ya next time.